One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was the different programs, because a lot of people ask those questions. I actually started out on Cubase when I was a teenager, and I know they're just sort of randomly. And then when I worked for this producer Eric Valentine for years, I learned Pro Tools and was like 15 years in on Pro Tools, going crazy. And then just about a year and a half ago, I switched over to Ableton.
Ableton.
And and Ableton, as many people will recognize, is just so much faster as a creative tool than Pro Tools.
Right.
But I also, there's so many things about it. There's so many things about it that are like, you can't quite edit audio in the same way, and there's no playlists, so doing vocals is more challenging and all that kind of stuff. But yet I know a lot of people who use Logic, which is sort of in between. I know you use Fruity Loops, or I don't know if I'm supposed to call it FL Studio or what I'm supposed to call it now, but you kind of
I call it Fruity Loops because back in the day,
things.
I use them all, and it's really interesting. So when I started music, I obviously didn't really know what I was into, so I got the Fruity Loops, and I hated FL Studio at the time because it was ancient. It was like little blocks and stuff. So I ended up doing the MPC, like the actual 2000 XL. They go into the 4000. Real hands-on stuff. So I can like chop up.
So hold on.
MPC
so when you started, you were MPC, and then what was your DAW? What was your computer program that you were actually using?
I honestly,
like, you burn it to a CD.
It went into Pro Tools, but I was with hardware, so it was like MPC 4000, Triton Extreme, Roland Phantom. It was a time where if you wanted to be a producer, you had to spend $10,000 because it was like the MPC cost exactly the name. So if it was 2000 XL, it cost $2,000. If it was a fucking MPC 4000, it was $3,900.
And now your iPhone has more power than any of those machines. But back in the day,
100%,
they were the things. That's all you could do.
That was the entry level buy-in. So most people couldn't be producers because they didn't buy in to the hardware that was needed to do it. So you didn't have all the, I would call them riffraffs in a way, hobbyists that come in. They really just like, yo, let me click some shit, let me do some shit, let's figure this shit out. And obviously you can definitely do that. But anyway, I moved from there. When I switched to software, I remember I was in a studio. It was 2007. It was these guys in Philly, and they were using Logic, and it was 2007. So it was like Logic. It wasn't even 9. It might have been an earlier Logic when Logic was PC. When Logic used to be on PC. It was like Imagine.
Before Apple bought it, before all of that. Yeah.
Right. So, so they're on there and they're talking VSTs. And it was so foreign to me that I was just like, I'm not fucking with that shit, bro. So what ends up happening is I moved to Atlanta in 2008. And when I moved to Atlanta, I sold all the hardware. I had to make a decision. I was like, I'm going to be traveling to Atlanta. It's a new city. I need to go portable. So what I ended up doing was selling all the shit, MPC, Triton Extreme, Phantom, all that stuff. And then I went and bought a laptop and Logic. So then you're talking about Logic 9, and Logic 9 was fire. Logic 9 was crazy, but it never updated. And then when it went to Logic 10, I was like, oh, hell no. And I went to Ableton. Right.
So why did you make that switch?
Because Logic 10 was so ugly at the time. Like it didn't do it changed a lot of the things that I was doing. So I went to Ableton, and then Ableton opened up a whole thing because you could like drag in loops and it would just flip it out. But I found using all those programs that everything had to end up in Pro Tools still. I couldn't get the sound that Pro Tools delivers. So then I figured out what the programs are, and I can tell you what program you used to make that beat. I've made beats in Cubase, Reason, which is crazy, not good. Crazy, not good. Listen, Reason is not good.
I know some people who use Reason, but I don't ever really fuck with it.
So the way I look at placement, so DCat, drums that knock, you got to have him on here because he'll geek out. Yeah. So me and Decaf, whatever, maybe we FaceTime maybe like a month or two ago, and because he said something on Twitter, which he was like, yeah, you can't tell the difference. I think he was talking about Unity game, like where you basically balance out things from different things and you kind of put them on top of each other, invert it, and it's like the same thing. That's cool. But I was like, yo, I can tell you what you used. If he said like Ableton or FL, he was like, which one? He had 5 things, and I picked 4 out of the 5. And he was like, well, how do you know these things? I'm over here like, well, if you must know, Ableton's hi-hats sound different. They sound thinner than FL Studio hi-hats. The same hi-hat pattern. You could drag the MIDI from Ableton, same sound in FL Studio, and the hi-hats sound more in your face in FL and more behind in Ableton.
People say that in the bussing on FL Studio has a certain kind of distortion and crunch on the high end, and that's with like Murder Beats and all those. Like, there's something about those drums, the way they distort into the master bus in FL Studio is different than the rest of the programs. It
has to be the summing on that makes the difference between all of them. So Ableton to me sounds paper thin in some areas. Logic sounds rich in piano sound. Any instrument, if you're doing the Logic, it's going to sound rich and full. If you do the MPC, the drums are going to hit just as hard, if not harder, in the swing as far as the, how it feels on the groove. That's going to lock in way tighter. Then you have Ableton, which is like, if you just want to drag in loops, time stretch loops, warp them in a fast, convenient way, Ableton is the way to go. You know what I'm saying? FL Studio, if you just want to use a mouse click in or whatever, it's just super easy to just really dial in things, The
FL Studio is like people draw, it has a more graphical interface. People draw things in. It's sort of a simpler program, but on some level, if your creative flow can be simple, sometimes that's the best thing.
Yeah, I think I use everything for different things. So I use FL Studio for
go through them. Go through each one. What do you creatively, like, philosophically, like, what do you like about each one?
Okay, so
I say Ahmad Jamal. These will be on my IGTV, and we'll put this up. We'll have an audio version too, so check that out after.
Cool, man.
Go ahead.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. So if I wanted to do something that was sample based, something that maybe like Kanye or even Just Blaze or someone like that, even Harry Fraud, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would use the MPC. It gives me way more control when I want to slice things up and hit the pads and just feel the sample. I don't think you can feel a chop to me unless you're on a pad. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're sitting down there on a keyboard, it's just not responsive to me. So I would 100% do MPC for that. FL Studio is surgical. You want those 808s to hit. You want those drums to knock. You want something that sounds like radio at the present moment. You want to go to FL Studio. If you want to do something that's like scoring, if you want to do something that's going to go crazy, you probably want to do either Logic or Cubase, If you want to do, where are we at? Reason's weird, man. Reason's just weird. So I don't even want to go into it. I know people that do it, you know what I'm saying? I just actually it's a guy named Maserati Sparks. And he's a freaking sample creative. Like, if you buy his packs, he makes some really tight shit, and he uses Reason. So he's able to make some really solid things. But I don't know if he's shared his process. But when I see his screen, it looks complicated. It doesn't look like it's something that most people want to get into. And Pro Tools is like the best thing ever, because Pro Tools, if it sounds shitty in Pro Tools, it's going to sound shitty everywhere else. Pro Tools is one of those things where when you, he said Reaper is the secret truth. I remember Reaper. Reaper used to crash a lot, and then it didn't have a good recall. The same with Studio One. I know, like, Sock Passe uses Studio One, and a guy named Tushar, a couple people. Studio One is the closest thing to Pro Tools and Cubase. But the problem is, if you were to upgrade to Battery 4.2, if you were using Battery, and it goes to 4.3, it loses the presets from your old sessions. So you would have to do really good note taking, and you would have to print stems. So I guess in my process, I never lose audio with Pro Tools. I never lose audio with FL Studio. I never lose audio with MPC.
Yeah, it's
with Ableton also too.
Yeah, the people really, when trying to get really technical and try to find the perfect thing, I think people undervalue the idea that you just want some shit that's going to work, and want some shit that you can just be creative and make things quickly. And I think, looking at your setup, which I know you showed a little bit on your story the other day, it just looks fun. It looks futuristic. It looks inspiring. And there's something really important about just having a setup where you want to have fun and make records. I mean, and it's a different thing if you're a mastering engineer, you need a different kind of setup. But if you're producing, like switching it up, moving around, trying new shit, like having fun doing it, and having reliable gear, not just being a reliable person, but having reliable gear so you can go in and just be creative.